Well, let's get the conversation going then. And Brandon C, are you able to unmute yourself? And could you let us know a little bit more about you and what your interests are here? Are you there? And
Hey
if
guys, how are you guys doing tonight?
doing well, what's your interest in
Hey,
India?
yeah. So just coincidentally, last week I work for a software development company, and we do drone simulation. And particularly 2 weeks ago, we were in Las Vegas for a large event that was there every year, and we had multiple different inquiries and people from India that were interested in our product. So
Okay.
I do business development. I'm the business development manager and head of sales for our company, and I wanted to gain some insight, I guess, if you will, about all the different kind of caveats, aspects, tricks, tips, things of that nature when doing business in India, and
Okay.
any specific businesses to look out towards, or to. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then let's kick it off. And so let me, Gunjan, I'll start it, just kind of do a start point so that we can clean out all of the beginning part of the recording and then kind of go from here. So if you're listening, I'm about to start the program, and then we'll go from there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to a conversation with the India expert, Gunjan Bagla of the Amritt Inc. Gunjan is a member of Global Chamber. He's on our advisory board for Global Chamber Los Angeles, and he's really an advisor to businesses all over the world about India, what the opportunities are. This is the second part of a conversation about India, and it was intended to be geared toward the Asia market and their understanding of India. I'm not sure we've got a lot, at least in the live version. Hopefully, the recorded version, we've got more in Asia who are interested in understanding more about China plus one and the impact that India can create in business opportunities, a variety of other industries. In part one, Gunjan was extremely helpful, demonstrated extreme knowledge around the markets in India. That's what he does. He helps people become successful there. And so we'll let him provide some initial information, and then we'll have some time for questions. So Gunjan, thank you for this second part of this series. And we'd love to hear more about not only some of the things you talked about the last time, but some of the gearing toward India that you talked, or toward Asia that you talked about. So thanks again for your support and collaboration. And I turn the floor to you, please.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's always fun talking to Global Chamber members. Let me go full screen. Okay. This presentation is geared towards talking about broad opportunities in India. I will go through this as quickly as you will let me, and then we can answer the live questions from the folks who are on the call as well. India has changed quite a bit in the 20 years since I started Amritt, and it is now among the top 10 trading partners to the US, the 5th largest economy in the world, the fastest growing economy in the G20 countries. So many people don't fully realize the new opportunities that exist in India. And that is what I want to pay some attention to. So India is going to be one of the largest automotive markets in the world. And when they talk about automotive in India, we include things that have less than 4 wheels. Okay? So 3-wheelers, 2-wheelers, all of those are included. There's a tremendous transformation happening towards EVs in India, much faster than anyone had predicted. Because as few as 10 years ago, the electric power in India was not terribly reliable. So it doesn't make sense to have an EV if you're going to charge it using a diesel generator. So that has changed really within the last 6 or 7 years, mostly through better utilization of existing capacity and better distribution. So I have some examples here of the kind of investments that Indian companies are making. Tata Motors, which is based in, whose main factory is in Pune in Western India, but they also own Land Rover and Jaguar. Mahindra, which is based in Mumbai. And for those of you who in the US, you might know that Mahindra licensed the manufacturing of the Jeeps back, shortly after the Second World War. And they still make a number of versions of SUVs. The investment into EVs is tremendous. Part of it is being driven by commercial applications. So small fleets for supply chain issues, and buses, and then two-wheelers for Amazon delivery into the narrow streets of India, where you can't expect a UPS or FedEx truck to go. So it's a wide range of opportunities that is available for companies all over the world to be able to participate in the electric vehicle boom in India. In fact, one of our clients a couple of years ago is based right here in Pasadena, and he came up with, he's a former SpaceX engineer, came up with a way to take those three-wheeler tuk-tuks and replace their engine with electric powertrain and battery. So many opportunities exist in this sector. So here's a few pictures of what might be considered an EV. You see that there are electric two-wheelers, there's small commercial vehicles. Ola is a competitor to Uber in India. And then you have small vans and the tuk-tuks I talked about, small delivery vehicles. That's where a lot of the action is. The largest bicycle maker in India, in the world, is an Indian company, Hero. And they also have a vibrant business in gasoline-based two-wheelers as well as electric two-wheelers. In fact, they've invested in a company right here in Northern California called Zero Motorcycles not so long ago. So Indian companies are also investing worldwide. I talked earlier about Tata buying Land Rover and Jaguar. Here you're talking about a bicycle maker investing in California. We know that oil is going to be a fading commodity in the next 20, 30 years. And Indian companies are looking at making a transition away from oil. This year, the finance minister of India announced a significant shift in investment towards hydrogen. And as some of you might know, Japan is a big player in the hydrogen industry, whether it's the production of green hydrogen, whether it is hydrogen filling stations, any aspect of the hydrogen economy. And I had this point here that people listening in from Japan should see India as a major opportunity across the entire spectrum of the hydrogen economy. You see on the right this table which shows so many of India's oil companies: Reliance, Indian Oil, ONGC, which is a exploration company. Indian Oil and ONGC are largely government-owned. Then the Gas Authority of India, which is also significantly government-owned. The National Thermal Power Corporation, which mostly runs coal-fired power stations. All of them are investing big time into hydrogen. And India doesn't have its basic hydrogen technology. So they're looking for people from all over the world to supply the things that are necessary for the transition to hydrogen. Renewable energy has always been an important part of India's economy, but the current government of Narendra Modi, when they took over in 2014, they really put solar energy on a turbo path. The goal of the previous government was to get 20 gigawatts by 2020, but you see India is already now in 2023 at 168 gigawatts of renewable energy, out of which 65 gigawatts or so is from solar power. Some of the largest utility scale solar farms are being built in the western states of India here, Rajasthan, which is a desert state, and Gujarat, which is the Prime Minister's home state. There's a number of large farms utility scale farms being built. and some of them are already operational. So if anything that goes into the solar generation system, whether it's the panels, the electronics, the collectors, even reflective solar, any kind of solar power is a big opportunity in India. India is one of the largest spenders on imported weapons and equipment, and that's of course because it has two unfriendly neighbors, Pakistan on the northwestern border and China on the northeastern border. Several thousand miles of border have to be protected. Both countries have had wars with India. China invaded India back in 1962, and a number of wars have been fought with Pakistan. India's main concern right now around security in long term is the concern about China. So they bought these General Atomics drones again from a Southern California company. These are armed drones that can carry weapons. You see that down below here. So India is buying over $3 billion of these, and some of them will actually be built and assembled in India. But for our friends in Asia, India also needs all kinds of supplies for its Army, Navy, and Air Force, including better clothing, shoes, helmets, you name it. So we think that continues to be a good opportunity. The Indian military is trying to encourage local manufacturing of some of these products, so companies can partner with Indian entities to do that. In fact, General Electric has partnered with Hindustan Aeronautics, which is government-owned, to build their high-end military engines for India's single-engine fighter aircraft. That's a huge, huge deal. That was just signed when the Indian Prime Minister came to Washington in June of this year. So many, many opportunities in defense. And it also applies to small companies. We helped a company called Trigicon, which makes the sights that go on top of rifles. And the advantage of the Trigicon sights is that they are fueled by a tiny, tiny amount of radioactive tritium, so that they never need a battery replacement, which is kind of important in, if you're in the middle of a battle, you don't want to be changing batteries. So it's been a great success when we took them to India. Now, many people think of India as an agricultural exporter, and that is very much true. 60% of India's population depends on agriculture, most of them working on small farms. But the Indian economy has grown so rapidly that many products that India used to export are now being imported. Vegetable oils, as you see on this graph, is India's largest agricultural import. But from here in California, we ship apples and pistachios all the way to India. India imports many other things, as you can see on this chart. India used to be a very large producer of cashews, but now they import a considerable amount from Vietnam. This package here represents something, the cashews coming in from Southeast Asia into India. So being a large and increasingly mature economy, the trade in India is going in both directions. I chuckled when I saw that India is also importing spices. All of India's early fame, going back 2,000 years, was based on the export of spices, but I guess there are certain spices that India doesn't produce enough of, so they're importing. Alcoholic beverages, I don't know whether you'd really call that agriculture, but India is the largest consumer of whiskey in the world, and much of they love their Scotch whiskey, as well as the Japanese alcoholic beverages have become very popular in India. India produces a lot of its own pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals, but nonetheless, it is a market for significant high-end nutraceuticals. I mean, that's the new name for what used to be called vitamins, minerals, and supplements. So it can be anything from protein shakes to fish oil to any kind of supplement that doesn't naturally grow in India or get produced in India. We do a lot of work with supplement companies that are entering India. We're working currently with a company that produces juvenile supplements and getting them into India. In addition to renewable power and solar power and so on, India is going to be a market for nuclear energy. Okay. They already have a number of plants based on heavy water that used technology that they first licensed from Canada and then have expanded it. But the new growth will also be in what are called the small or smart nuclear reactors. Here's a picture of one that is in production or in design, I should say, by an American company. But we will see dozens of SMR designs getting licensed in the next 10 years. And as these small nuclear plants become available, I suspect that a significant portion of the fuel will be supplied by Japanese companies. Several Japanese companies are very large traders in uranium, plutonium, and other radioactive materials. A significant Korean company built a major nuclear power plant in the United Arab Emirates. And of course, they are eager to participate in the nuclear energy expansion in India. So again, I'm highlighting some of the opportunities, real and potential, for Asian companies. And I will soon move to sourcing from India as well. Okay. So India is now the world's largest country by population. And most of its people are young, in their 20s or early 30s and teens. And many of them don't have jobs. As India tries to grow its manufacturing capability, there's a tremendous need to train blue-collar workers in India. So any company that can offer excellent training to take people who grew up on farms and enable them to work in the cities, work in the factories, no matter what industry. I think any company that has that capability is going to do very well in India, providing those training skills, education related to the semi-skilled or blue-collar kind of work. People really didn't think of India as a manufacturing hub, but that has changed significantly. So over the years, India has been a large manufacturer of pharmaceuticals and chemicals and a number of other products. But now we are seeing India going head to head in many sectors where China has led in the last 25 years. And some years ago, I coined this term China plus one, because we don't expect any of our clients to abandon China as a source. But being exclusively dependent on China creates a significant market risk for companies who worry about the tension between the world's largest economy, the US, and the world's second largest economy, China. So that's one factor. And many people also worry about the potential tension in the Taiwan Straits, which could cause a disruption of the supply chain from China. So smart companies are starting to put up significant portions of their manufacturing or their vendors in India. And the most significant of them in the last couple of years has been Apple, which uses Wistron and Foxconn, both of which are Taiwanese companies who produce the products for Apple, mostly in China. Now, both Foxconn and Wistron have been asked by Apple to expand their India manufacturing. I understand they already have 50,000 employees in India over the last couple of years, in Bangalore and in Chennai. In fact, I was quoted in an article in Fortune magazine that described the rapid growth of both of those companies. They're making not only iPhones, but now they're going to assemble iPads and Macintosh computers, a whole range of Apple products, including the latest ones. So the iPhone 14 is being assembled in India. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I visited a number of electronics factories in India that are working with companies all over the world to assemble, build products for them for sale in every country you can imagine, including the US and Japan. India has been a supplier of pharmaceuticals. In fact, if you take any generic medications anywhere in the world, there's a good chance that the medication was produced in India. I'm diabetic, I take metformin. I buy it from Kaiser, my HMO, and I don't think I've seen any metformin that they've provided to me that wasn't made in India. I also take statin because I have a family history of blood pressure and stroke and so on. And the statins such as atorvastatin or Lipitor, as it used to be called, are also produced in very high volume in India. So India can be a source for any kinds of pharmaceuticals. And now they are getting into the APIs, the ingredients that make the pharmaceutical products. China leads in that, but India is developing capacity very rapidly in collaboration with US technology companies to make that happen, again, targeting this supply chain resilience that I talked about earlier. At Amritt, we do a tremendous amount of work in medical devices. And today, about 70% of the revenue in medical devices in India is the product of American companies. But this year, the Indian government announced a very ambitious new medical device policy. In fact, on Friday this week, I'm going to my new article on the subject of India's medical device policy and the opportunities it creates for foreign companies to become more vigorous in India. That article is going to come out, and anybody who listens to this webinar, either the live version or the recorded one, can send me a message on LinkedIn or otherwise. I'll be happy to share that article with whoever wants it. It's probably going to publish in one of the Life Science Connect publications, such as Medical Device Online. So already companies such as Siemens and GE Healthcare have factories in India. And then there are third parties making tens of millions of dollars of product in India, some of which is exported out of India into China, into Europe, into Africa, into Southeast Asia. But this is going to grow at more than 20% per year if all of the things that India's policy envisions are going to become real. So there's a huge opportunity for Western companies or Asian companies to leverage the incentives, the production-linked incentives or subsidies that the Indian government is willing to offer to medical technology companies to put up factories or put up partnerships in India. I talked about pharma already, so I won't dwell on it further. India has more than 1 billion cell phones, and much of the cell phone infrastructure, not just the handsets that I talked about earlier, which Samsung has its largest handset factory in Greater Noida near New Delhi. You see the picture of Tim Cook with India's Prime Minister. He was there earlier this year to inaugurate the first Apple stores in India, in New Delhi and Mumbai. But there's a tremendous production of telecom infrastructure, whether it is the antennas, the land connections, all of the equipment that goes into making the telecom infrastructure more reliable, including fiber optic networks and all of that. So all of the global companies that produce telecom hardware and software are very much operational in India, and this will continue to grow. India is soon going to become the largest data consumer in the world because of the amount of time Indians spend on their 4G phones watching entertainment content in particular. So there's a significant ongoing increase in demand to manufacture product in India, as well as use India as a base to export product. 20 years ago, India was really nowhere in terms of high quality food processing. And Indian companies realized that if you just sell the raw material, you make a certain amount of money. But if you convert that raw material into edible product, your margins go up significantly. So that has now happened. India has world-class food processing facilities across the country, and many of these are now available to be able to take input from anywhere in the world and transform it into edible product for shipment anywhere. You'll already see some of these products in American grocery stores. It's not so visible yet because most of this is on an OEM basis, but it's really starting to increase. So anybody who's in the food production or processing business should really consider India as a source. Of course, you know that India's history going back thousands of years was very strong in textiles. But when the British ruled India for 200 years, they reversed the flow where India, instead of being an exporter of textiles, was forced under the British rule to import textiles from Manchester and other British locations. Well, 75 years of independence has changed that, and now India is a significant exporter of the highest quality cotton, as well as products made from cotton and from synthetic fibers. Here I'm highlighting India's capability and interest in what are called smart textiles. And those of you who don't know what smart textiles are, basically what you wear is going to become intelligent. It will have electrical sensitivity and capability to measure pressure, temperature, those kinds of factors. So this is usable for human beings as they exercise, as they go into cold or hot conditions. But it's also going to apply to the booming robotic industry. People tell me that within 5 years, we will have $5,000 or $3,000 personal robots in our homes. And those robots need to have tactile sensitivity. It can't just be metal touching metal. You know, if they're going to open your fridge or load your clothes washer with your clothes, they need to be able to have some sense of touch and pressure. And that's going to be provided by smart textiles, which will be produced and integrated in a significant amount in India. We're currently working with a company that's doing exactly that for the robotics business. So India used to be very nervous about drones and anything that flies. And just in the last 5 years, the government has changed its approach. So they are encouraging the production of all kinds of drones. They're using small drones flying at low altitude to map out the entire country down to the last inch. This is very important because historically India has had a lot of disputes over real estate, particularly rural or agricultural real estate. So by using these small drones with cameras, they are going to be able to map it out. And that's very important to India because once a farmer can define his property, his or her property very clearly, then they can take a loan against it. And they can use that loan to plant crops and be able to make money without having to borrow from third parties. So it's a significant move by the government, but it's then resulting in this huge drone industry. At the high end, there's a company in India that's now worth $1 billion. It's a unicorn producing drones for the Indian Army. And of course, they rely on technology and product that is being imported from other countries. So if you're in the drone business, I think one of the attendees mentioned something about drones. There's going to be a tremendous interest from Indian entities because they can't really do everything themselves. They're going to be in the design and assembly business, I think, and they're going to rely on hardware and software coming from the world over. Okay, so that's the end of my formal presentation. I am happy to take questions of any kind from anyone.
That's great. Thank you, Gunjan. Really, really great summary and appreciate it. What questions do you have? Lothar, is India, I know you have resources in India. Did you have any specific questions about some of the industries that Gunjan talked about, or do you have other questions?
No, I really don't. We have a number of IT providers in India and also a chartered accounting company, but we don't really have any manufacturing or anything like that. We're more in the service spectrum.
Yeah, that's of course a huge sector, Lothar. And I didn't talk about it in this presentation because I was bringing out new opportunities. But the knowledge-based workers, whether they are in accounting or software or IT, now employ a good 5 to 10 million people in India at some of the highest salaries that Indians make. So do you have vendors who do this, or do you have your own team?
We have a number of independent associates in India. They're not our employees. They're independent contractors who we represent in the United States and other countries throughout the world. We're very global. We have 30-some countries with ZG Worldwide associates. But our presence in India is actually quite large.
And your presence is through getting these people connected to vendors that are typically are in different places, not in India.
Right.
Okay, very good. So yeah, Gunjan, I mean, that's kind of the historic segment that most of us know, right, over the last several decades, information technology workers. And how is that segment faring, given that the world is becoming more competitive, and you've got different parts of the world opening up? I have a meeting right after this conversation with a new member out of the Philippines. Obviously, that's a long time competitor, not as successful or effective as India. However, they're pretty successful.
Yeah,
and
they are. So let me answer the point about the Philippines. A significant number of Indian companies employ tens of thousands of people in the Philippines. Okay?
wow,
So Indian companies do not see the Philippine entities as threats. They really see them as resources.
interesting.
And the way that many of them are using the partnerships in the Philippines, or their own employees in the Philippines, is that Filipinos generally can speak English with an American accent, since the Philippines was an American colony not so long ago. Okay? And so, if you have a back office providing support or customer service, more and more people want to do as much as they can through chat or text, because that can be automated, that can use AI. Okay? But a good deal of it has to be done by voice. And there's a vibrant business in India training people how to speak with an American accent, but that has been a challenge to grow that sector. So it's growing and it's large, but Indian companies say, hey, we go to the Philippines, we can hire someone who an American can understand readily. So why not do that?
Yeah.
So it's a very cool. One of my good friends has an equal number of employees in both the Philippines and India. Another threat that you did not mention, Doug, that I think is on the minds of most people who work in this knowledge world, is the threat that AI will take their jobs.
Yeah.
Okay. So at the G20 summit that happened in India earlier this month, just before that, there was a B20 summit, the business leaders from all over the world. And one of the takeaways from that was that India will not lose employment because of AI. In fact, it will gain employment, because AI will enable people in India with very limited skills to now start programming, and taking away some of the lower end skills that the whole world needs. So the largest IT services company in India is called TCS, Tata Consultancy Services. They're almost 500,000 employees now, and they're expecting to accelerate their employment as a result of AI. It was very surprising to me. But if you think about what AI is doing, it's really making humans more productive. And so Indian companies feel that it's going to be a positive factor. Now, let me turn also to Lothar's situation. Do you have more than 100 people in India, Lothar, at this time?
Well, in a way we do. We have one company that has several hundred employees, but it's there. Like I said, that company is not our. We're not employers. You know what I mean? We're just they're contractors for us.
Yeah. So if your head count in India starts to approach 100, you might want to think about creating a subsidiary of your own and having direct control over some of these people who are working through third parties. That's usually the threshold number which you need to be able to overcome the overhead of having direct employment in India. Many people can do it with much smaller headcounts, but if you're in the kind of business you described, that's something you might want to consider. We're setting up a company for a friend of mine who will have 7 employees in India, but he expects to grow it to about 40 within 2 years. And so it's making sense for him to incorporate a subsidiary, in his case, in the city of Chennai, because he has someone he knows who lives in Chennai who can run that unit. There's something to consider.
Yeah, Rishab is the name of the company, and they are in several cities, and I think they have 300 some employees in the several cities.
I see. Wonderful.
Okay. Any other questions, Lothar, or any other questions in the audience, please?
Yeah, Gunjan, thank you very much for that presentation summary. It was great. Actually very clean, clear, and straight to the point. Obviously, during the last slide, that caught my interest, but also a lot of the other big industry that's currently in India, I think it's related to, and that's drones. More so than, just as a background, we're a small software development company based out of Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., and we specialize in drone simulation for training, for commercial training from military, police, fire, agriculture, mining, all of the sectors pretty much, even power, gas, all of it. And any industry or vertical today globally that utilize or has these types of sectors, which pretty much every fairly large country has, they're utilizing drones as a large asset to do jobs that otherwise would be very difficult to do, very costly to do, and not as effective.
Yeah.
So with that said, we have a global presence. Granted, it's a smaller one as we are still a small team, but we have a large presence, especially in the United States. I would easily tell you that majority of our customers are universities and public schools all across the states, but we have some interest from training companies or companies that are looking to grow their presence in India. And we have a few customers existing, but after our most recent event, the inquiries have come up and more attention has come our way. And we want to know what's the best way to go about, sourcing the right, or looking towards the right type of customers, as well as, if there's any government possibilities there, as well as we have a few government contracts here in the U.S. that we were luckily awarded, as well as currently working on an Australian Department of Defense contract with our simulator as well. So there's a lot of possibilities in every avenue, and I just want to kind of pick your brain and understand, where would you start if you were me, or where would you look towards in India?
Yeah. So one thing that you have to really invest some time and effort is in evaluating the quality of those leads. And I mean, we do that routinely in the US. If you get 100 leads from a show, you want to classify the most promising ones based on whatever criteria. And we know how to do that as an American company. You know how to do that very well with American prospects, right? But when you are looking at prospects coming from the other side of the planet, things are sometimes not what they seem, in both good and a bad way. Sometimes a company that appears very small or insignificant may be a very important prospect for you. And sometimes somebody who talks up a big game, there may be nothing behind them. I mean, I'll give you an extreme example that happened early on in our development of Amritt. This company had we did some work in the video game business, Brandon, and this company had a very, impressive booth at a video game show. One of our clients was very impressed by them. The person manning the show was a former McKinsey partner. He had a very credible story, and our client wanted to give an initial significant, more than a 7-figure project to them. And I just had a little bit of unease, and I said, look, I'm planning to go to India. Why don't I visit these people for a couple of days? Okay. So long story short, that impressive booth and the impressive person at the trade show was all a facade. We ended up in an electronics warehouse where the son of the owner had an ambition to be in the video game business. He was sitting in one cubicle, and next to him was another cubicle where 2 people were sitting, learning the basic tools of video game software. That was it. They were working full-time as warehouse employees, and part-time they were learning the
Wow.
Nothing. There was absolutely nothing.
You have to respect the effort. You do have to respect the effort and the trial there, but definitely something to learn from, for sure. I'm assuming.
I'll give you a 180-degree opposite example.
Yeah.
We helped a company that was in the plumbing business, and they wanted to buy brass and bronze components from India.
Mhm.
My team looked in all the major cities and we weren't happy. And then I got a lead that there is a set of small companies in a tiny town called Jamnagar on the coast of Gujarat. Okay. My people didn't even want to go there. They said, this is a complete waste of time, Gunjan. Okay. And my senior person at that time was an MIT graduate, very smart, working in Bangalore. He flew out to that town and he came back absolutely amazed. These Gujarati entrepreneurs are all related. They're kind of competing with each other, but not really. None of their factories had even signage outside. They were all very humble people. But if you gave them enough volume for a particular part, they would build a machine for that purpose. They didn't use machining centers, lathes, milling machines, whatever. They would build a custom machine to produce just that part and nothing else. And they were able to do it at very high quality at very reasonable prices. And most of their customers were European companies at that time. But you wouldn't have given them the time of day if somebody sent you a picture of the outside of the building or had a conversation with one of the owners, because they barely spoke any English. Okay.
Yeah.
But our client then visited them, and they were from the East Coast, and immediately they signed a deal for several components. So things are not what they seem sometimes, and you really need to conduct some due diligence on those prospects. You can't use Dun and Bradstreet or Hoover's for that. It doesn't work very well, in my experience. You just by if you have 100 leads, maybe 10 of them are very good, and you just need to sort out which 10, and then you will do well in India. I'm actually coming out to your neighborhood on the weekend. You said you're to Washington, right?
Yeah, right north of Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. area.
Got it. Yeah. So I would advise you to conduct some serious due diligence before you start spending effort. I had another client who was in the aircraft leasing business, and they got an inquiry from the Indian Air Force, and they were ready to jump on a plane and make a presentation. And I was able to dissuade them simply because I saw who had sent the inquiry. And that individual was at a rank that they couldn't even buy a cup of coffee. So they were not going to be, they could make all the inquiries they wanted, but it was just not going to be worth their while to fly out there. Okay.
Understood.
Those are the kinds of things we have to sort out.
Yeah. So if I guess the question for you is, where would you search if you wanted to actively promote your business in India, and the pretense of what I do and what we do, and it being software, not something physically, you don't have to worry so much about logistics and kind of a smoother, simpler process, but it is in demand globally. Where would you start? What would you look to do, in that sense, if I may, from either Indian government or Indian, federal law enforcement, things of that nature? Where would you start?
Sure. So selling into the government, whether it's in the US or in India, is a whole nother beast compared to selling to corporations. Your product will have application at the state level. India has 29 states. Some states are a lot easier to do business with than others, and I would focus on those states. The federal government has lots of money to spend, but again, it's department by department. So if it's the Ministry of Defense, they are really worried about India's external borders. Then there is the Home Ministry, which is more like our Homeland Security. Okay? And within it, there are many separate units. There are the police forces, which are largely state-run, but there is something called the Central Industrial Security Force, CISF, which secures all of the airports, which secures large factories, and many other establishments. And some of those are easier to sell to. Now, I would need to really have an offline conversation with you to understand all of the nuances of your business, to be able to say where you should focus first. But our client, Trichicon, whom I mentioned earlier, I can take some of these names because we did the work long ago and the confidentiality agreements have expired. But Trichicon did a tremendous job selling to the state police forces, trying to sell to the Central Indian Army, which wanted to buy 1 million rifles was a much, much harder job for them. So we
Yeah.
had them focus on the state and city level security, and they did a very good job there.
And that's where they started, right?
That's where they grew very rapidly.
Yeah.
Now, software, in a sense, is an easier sale because you don't have physical deliveries involved, and you can set the software so that there's very little chance of piracy. I'm sure you know how to do that with software as a service. There seems to be a training component to what you do, and that might require some travel to India, which is actually going to be a good thing for you.
What I asked is let's get you guys connected, and maybe over the next week or two, you guys can connect up. Even Gunjan, you said you're in DC next week or in Maryland?
No, I'm leaving tomorrow just for the weekend. India's external affairs minister is in town, and they invited me to come see him. So I'm just there for the weekend. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your information and insight. I definitely, if you're open to a physical meeting or a virtual meeting offline, that I would greatly appreciate that and any more insight that you might have.
Sure, we can take that offline. I'm sure Doug or his colleague can connect us together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the time today, and all the viewers. If you're watching this via video, Gunjan, any final comments and thoughts that you'd like to make? Either kind of the general question that Brandon asked really was, what should I do next, right? Like whatever your business is, your product or service, you see people, you make some initial mistakes, and that ends up setting off a cascade of things that ultimately lead to a suboptimal success or worse. What are some of the things that people should think about, and what other comments do you have in closing?
Yeah. So one thing I would say, when you deal with India, if you are new to the country, you have to have a sense of humility. You have to understand that when an Indian says something odd or strange, don't automatically assume that you are somehow superior to them. Okay? I think we as Americans tend to do that wherever we go, but particularly in India, some of the things that we take for granted are not the way they are seen. So in the US, we say, call a spade a spade. Be direct, say what you mean and mean what you say. In Asia in general, that is not appreciated. The wisdom lies in the texture of what is said, and sometimes in our pressure to be direct, we stop listening carefully enough to the Indian counterpart. So by humility, I don't mean you denigrate or degrade yourself, but listen with great curiosity, the curiosity of a child almost, to listen to. If they say something strange, ask them to explain. They say, I'm not sure what that means. Can you explain that to me? Okay? And people will give you some information. If you can turn to an expert who has dealt with India before, they might also be of some help. Okay? India is not an opaque society. Okay? India is not a society where you have to learn the language, because business is conducted in English. But Indians do not think American. They may speak English, but they don't think American. And so you need to cross that barrier. Okay? If you're doing significant business with India, then it's really important to spend time there. You can't do it by phone and Zoom, no matter what. I'm called an India expert. I travel to India several times a year, and there has not been one trip to India in the last 20 years where I haven't come back saying, oh, gee, I learned something significant. I've been doing something silly all these years. Okay? Every single trip, including the one in May this year. That's exactly what happened to me at least twice. Okay, so those would be my general tips. Some of these points are covered in my book on doing business in India, in the cross-cultural communication chapter. See, the challenge is, Doug, that when you're doing business with China, Japan, or Korea, they don't understand you. So you hire an interpreter, translator, whatever. But for good or for bad, most Americans find that they have an Indian physician or an Indian co-worker. And they say, oh, I can understand him or her, so I must understand India. Nothing could be further from the truth, because your Indian physician or co-worker has been away from India for so long that they don't understand India either. and India has changed since they left. Okay, so those are the, general closing thoughts I would leave you with.
Lulled into believing that you're understood or that you're understanding.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. Thank you so much, Gunjan, for sharing today. Thanks all of you here and also on the video. If you're interested in learning more, contact Gunjan directly. He's easy to find on LinkedIn. He's got a very strong presence there. And if nothing else, you can send an email to info@globalchamber.org, and we're happy to make the introduction. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
guys. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful
guys.
evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Gunjan. Really appreciate it.